definitely.
The 2 points you have made sound pretty defensive in nature, but do you think your Western counterparts in the negotiations with which you have been involved for many times can fully understand the concerns of the Chinese authorities and understand the Chinese agenda in achieving these goals set forth largely by our Western players?
Well, I think you have mentioned indeed a very important point, namely communication or mutual understanding. In fact, that is part of the reason why the Chinese government has all along emphasized so much the importance of international cooperation, as we have conducted over the past so many years. And even in the bilateral way, it is our belief and our hope that we could ensure that each party can, to the best extent possible, understand the other's concern and try as much as possible to accommodate each other's concern. It is only through this kind of friendly dialogue and consultation can we, in the best possible way, address the existing problems or bilateral concerns.
Given the growing integration of China into the international economic order, there have been widespread and very extensive coverage on what's happening here in this country, and an important part of the Western media coverage about this country has always been trade disputes as well as IPR protection. And a lot of the criticisms target what we have failed to do. Do you think the Western media is deliberately building up pressure, and that has served as a strong incentive for China to make a really remarkable progress? What do you think of this sort of approach?
Just a putting aside approach adopted by the Western media, let me share with you how I view the soul of journalism. I think the very soul and essence of journalism should be respect for facts, as well as impartial and objective reporting. So over the past 20 years, China has achieved so much in terms of enforcement. We have mobilized more than 300,000 people working in the enforcement and judicial bodies, and last year we established across the nation 50 IPR service centers and opened a service hotline of 12312 so as to listen to the IPR-related complaints. All those efforts are fairly effective in cracking down on piracy, and even according to a lot of international community assessment as well as industrial association, China's performance has been improving really, very considerably. For example, the former Director General of WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Office, Mr. Bogosh, once said that China has accomplished all its current achievements in a speed unmatched in the history of IP protection. And also James Zimmerman, who is the president of American Chamber of Commerce in China, at an April high-level forum on IPR protection held in this country, saying that China really has made marvelous progress on all fronts of intensified efforts for IPR protection. And BSA, the Business Software Alliance of the United States, recently commented China, saying that over the past 3 years, the piracy rate in this nation has been cut by 10%. And this, I think, is even a better performance than some of our negotiating partners, as you mentioned, the United States, because according to the same organization, at this stage, the US has seen as high as 23% piracy rate of the Microsoft's operating system on its own market.
The focus of today's interview is really about the protection of IPR, and one of the issues concerning this area, I'm afraid, is the legislative work. What do you think of the progress that China has made, if any, in this particular regard?
Actually, I think legislation has been one of the very highlights of China's achievements in its IPR protection over the past 20 years, and its efforts so far have been widely acknowledged by the international community, because over the past decades, we have put into place already a rather full and international rules-compliant legal system composed of not only laws, but also regulations. You will find very diversified sources of China's legal documents, because not only will you find professional laws such as trademark law, patent law, and copyright law, but also in the more general and more specialized laws such as criminal law, contracts law, or even anti-unfair competition law. You will find specific IPR dedicated clauses or sections. Moreover, we have got the State Council regulations and departmental rules, as well as the Supreme People's Court and Supreme People's Procuratorate jointly promulgated judicial interpretations on the enforcement of the IPR. So it has been a very comprehensive way of presenting China's legislative efforts. This is for one thing. Also, though China has not been any early bird in the field of IPR legislation, we have tried our best to take into consideration a lot of important factors. For example, China's current economic development level, as well as the international obligations we should observe, since China has already been a party to almost all the major international conventions, treaties concerning IPR protection. It is especially worth mentioning that during the course of China's preparation for its WTO accession, we have conducted a very thorough effort to review and amend our domestic legal system, IPR-related ones included, of course, so as to bring them completely in line with the WTO rules, especially the TRIPS agreement. And we have done that. Pascal Lamy, the Director General of the WTO, at the end of last year, commended China's good compliance with the WTO rules in all aspects, of course, including IPR protection.
Let's take a closer look at the issue within the framework of the WTO. The trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, the so-called TRIPS, is an important international convention on IPR protection and enforcement. China has been a WTO member for 5 years. What's your comment on this convention called the TRIPS?
Yeah, TRIPS, as you rightly pointed out, it was actually one component of the whole single undertaking documents agreed upon at the end of the 8th multilateral trade negotiations, as we so call it, the Uruguay round. It was endorsed in the 1993 at the end of that year and became valid formally on the first day of 1995. This TRIPS agreement, with its wide coverage and very high level of IPR protection, as well as a strong binding force, has been holding a very important role in the whole WTO system. And it is one of the agreements that have to be observed and enforced by each and every WTO member. I should say that this agreement, in its very design and final wording, has taken into full consideration the actual situation and economic development level of all the WTO members, including developing countries. It has well stricken a balance between, if you like, rights and obligations. So therefore, it is widely recognized and supported by the whole WTO contracting parties. Talking about China, we are still a developing country, as you know, and on our way marching forward towards better IPR protection, we have indeed encountered with some difficulties and problems. But that never ever slowed our efforts in intensifying IPR protection. Instead, we have bring ourselves in full compliance with the TRIPS.
What are the problems and challenges we are facing?
Coming back to the basic national condition of China, China is a country, a big developing country with altogether 1.3 billion people, out of which something like 800 million are dwelling in the rural areas. So it has taken China a very long time to get those people enough food and enough thing to wear. And even today, we still face the arduous task of getting some people out of the absolute poverty line. But given these circumstances, it is understandable how difficult it is for us to generally spread the idea of intellectual property rights to every corner of the Chinese society. That is one very basic fact that nobody can deny. Even our leadership never tries to cover this fact. Actually, you cannot expect anyone, when he does not enjoy enough food, to think about anything so high as IPR protection. But given this, the Chinese government's firm determination to strengthen IPR protection remains unchanged. The reason is that we have taken note of the important role of innovation and of creation and the importance of protecting people's intellectual assets and creativity so as to boost the whole country's development. So we will remain firm whatever happened on this track. We will continue along this line. But still, we have to mention and we have to be sober-minded about the basic national condition. And that is what we have been repeatedly telling the outside world. Despite of all the progress we have made so far, you have to focus on China's national condition. You have to understand, and please offer understanding to China's national conditions.
All right, thank you very much. You are watching Dialogue with Ms. Yuan Yuan, Assistant Spokesperson from the Ministry of Commerce. We are talking about the IPR protection in China. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
They are not just big names, but great minds. When you look them in the eye, you discover vision and wisdom. It's not just Q&A, but highly interactive. When we start talking, the dialogue becomes a testing ground for novel ideas and a battlefield for diverse views between East and West. Stay tuned for Dialogue, a vibrant exchange of views on positions and policies, emotions and reasoning.
With Linglong Tire, there will be no uneven road in the world.
CCTV9, China's only English-language news channel, broadcasts throughout China and across the globe. CTV Golden Bridge is CCTV International's exclusive advertising agent and can put your company in touch with an audience of millions.
Welcome back. Well, the image of China is very important. It's something that not only the Western media has been keen on covering, but also a top concern of many of the Chinese here. What do you think of for example, the issue of China's enforcement in ensuring IPR protection? Is there anything that we are proud of?
Of course.
Or something we should feel ashamed of instead?
Of course, something proud of, definitely. Ashamed of, never heard of that. You know, enforcement has been one of the focus, as you rightly put it, especially among the Western media and the Western world, when it comes to the topic of China's IPR protection. I think one of the reasons is because when you have laws written on the paper, one very difficult job is how to get it implemented and delivered, given the case of China's vast territory, so many different places, and the various levels of education and people's livelihood and economic development level. But I should say, over the past 20 years, China has really been very brilliant in putting into place a system of enforcement featuring dual track of administrative and judicial protection. By that I mean, on the one hand, we have set up several specific departmental agencies to take care of the various varieties of IPR categories listed in TRIPS. For example, copyright, we have got the NCAC, the National Copyright Administration of China, to take care, and we've got patent under the leadership of the SIPO, or State Intellectual Property Office, and the job of part of the job of SAIC, the State Administration for Industry and Commerce, is to look at the trademark protection thing in this nation. And customs, of course, will be held accountable for the IPR enforcement efforts on borders or in the import and export stage. So these are what we call the administrative channel. So far, this enforcement channel has been proved highly effective. And on the other hand, we do have a judicial protection channel where we have the public security bodies and the procuratorates as well as the courts joining their efforts together to ensure effective cooperation, effective protection. And for a right holder, once you have found your rights and interests infringed upon by a violator, you can choose either way, to go to the administrative body for a settlement or just go to court. It's up to you. So that is part of the reason why we believe we have indeed achieved a lot in terms of the enforcement. And as I quoted earlier, the BSA number, namely the 10% decline of the pirated software, is a good evidence here, because without such enforcement efforts, how can you make sure that data cannot automatically come down, right? But apart from that, I should say we have, ever since 2004, established one very effective national mechanism, and that is the so-called National Working Group on IPR Protection, mainly responsible for the whole country's IPR enforcement work, headed by very famous Vice Premier Madam Wu Yi. And under this leadership, we have got interparliamental efforts to involving both the administrative organs and the judicial departments to work together to ensure a nationwide effective IPR protection. And moreover, starting from 2006, we have formulated this, which is the action plan on China's IPR protection. We have so far been formulating and publicated 2 pieces. Both are bilingual languages and made available through important channels as trade fairs and Canton Fair, for example, the Central China Expo, as well as high-level forum on IPR protection. It was also given as gifts or reading materials, if you like, after important bilaterals to foreign guests.
Let's look at the regional characteristics of the IPR issue. Do you think countries can fight the battles alone, or do you think more should be done to strengthen the international coordination?
Of course, not alone. The IPR protection is not at all a specific regional issue, but instead it is of global nature. By that I mean we have, in a lot of case detection, found cross-border IP violating criminal activities, if you like, involving some linkages or certain stages of the production or of the sales located elsewhere, some of them in the United States. So that is why we emphasize a lot on the international cooperation, especially through the bilateral channels for information sharing, for clue provision. For example, we are talking about IP violation. It is very hard for us in such a huge country to know specifically where the hideouts are for those infringers. But if a foreign IP holder, you have got a clue, we warmly welcome you to complain, to lodge a complaint to our IPR service centers. And so long as we got that clue, we will look very seriously into those things.
Excuse me, do you mean we have a specific telephone numbers for those to voice their complaints? The hotline has been established.
We have got a hotline, yeah. Across all the 50 service centers we have established in medium-large cities in China last year, and the number is 12312. You can call it if you like. So we have to, through this bilateral or multilateral international cooperative efforts, to cut off the chain, the whole chain of the cross-border IPR infringement. This is for one thing. For the second thing, I think sometimes we are really curious about the pirated DVDs. How come some of the blockbusters, even never put on the screen in the United States, already got fake copies or pirated copies here on the Chinese market? So where is the source of this master copy? I'm sure that we have to think about the very source of the country where it was born, you know, because we will be having no way in going to that country and having that copy, which is yet released to the general public, and get it pirated.
So the evil got to be stopped at the point of its origin. In terms of where we have the source, that's a very interesting point. What can we do to make overseas observers of China's IPR protection feel more confident? Because it seems to be a big issue that a lot of those in the West are very suspicious about what is being done by the Chinese authorities to reduce violations of IPR and, of course, trademarks infringements as well.
I think parts of the reasons we have already covered. That is due to the lack of an objective enough or comprehensive enough reporting by some or certain Western media. So the Western people are yet, some of them are yet to be equipped with a comprehensive picture of China's real considerate efforts as well as marvelous achievements in IPR protection. But talking about how to boost confidence, I think two things. First, fundamentally, we will continue our efforts of protecting IPR in an effective way. And one very specific move we are going to take during the course of this year is to well implement this 2007 action plan. These are not written only for paper, for white and black, but to be delivered in action. Actions speak louder than words, as we strongly believe it. For example, we are going to formulate and amend 14 rules and regulations this year, and we are going to promulgate another 7 judicial interpretations and guiding opinions so as to ensure more effective guarantee of IPR protection. And secondly, we are going to wage tougher battle against infringement, especially for those most problematic industries or places, as you mentioned, some of the markets. And thirdly, we are going to ensure better services offered by the already established IPR service centers to make their services more convenient for the IP holders to enjoy. And fourthly, we can expect the promulgation of a national strategy of IP protection. It is already known that China has identified the IP protection as a national strategy, and the formulation of the strategy is expected to be completed before the end of this year. I think that will be a very strong impetus to the overall efforts of China's IP protecting campaign. Moreover, as always, education and training remains a top priority of the Chinese government, and we will continue to do that. Talking about the vast majority of the people, we need to educate the society. And we have an annual IPR publicity week held in every April. And I think that has been a very effective way to make the concept of IP known to more people, to make known to them that it is harmful to use fake fertilizer, and you will get no crops at all when the harvest season comes out, etc. We will let the local people know about those things. And apart from these specific measures, I think one other very important thing, perhaps of even more critical importance as I see it, is further strengthening of international cooperation. Part of it we have already discussed about how to enhance mutual understanding, but another thing is about publicity. I think talking about a correct or a fair publicity of China's IPR performance, we need the help and concerted efforts of both Chinese media and the Western media. The Western media we have analyzed, and you have analyzed. The Chinese media, you are here, and I really very appreciate this opportunity to invite me to be here and share with the viewers of this program what is the position of the Chinese government and what we have done. Apart from this, actually we have many other channels. For example, the regular or irregular press conferences held either by the competent IPR agencies in China or by the State Council Information Office. Important and useful information can be delivered there as well. Also, China, having in mind the fact that a lot of foreigners cannot read and write Chinese at this stage, though some of them do, and very fluent, we have opened an official website for IP protection. And you can get access to it at www.ipr.gov.cn. So documents of this kind in both Chinese and English languages can be found there, as well as the latest news and achievements and measures adopted by the Chinese government. So it's all about communication, my second part. I think apart from what we have done in real sense, earnestly, of course, that is the foundation. You have to do this thing, and we will do this thing definitely for our own good. Not at all out of external concerns, as you mentioned, or just purely for living up to our international standards. But secondly, to have better understanding of the other's actual situation, be realistic, will be very helpful to the Western world.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
A royal welcome for President Hu Jintao as he begins his state visit to Sweden. Senior leaders are among the visitors to a new exhibition celebrating China's cultural heritage. A landslide kills 3 people while floods force hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homes in Guangdong. And the Chinese community in Costa Rica celebrates the country's decision to forge diplomatic ties with China. Hello and welcome to China Today. I'm Zhou Yue in Beijing. President Hu Jintao has arrived in the Swedish capital Stockholm for a state visit. Swedish King Carl Gustaf met the president and his wife Liu Yongqing. Liu Yang has more.
The royal reception shows the importance of the visit, which envisions further expansion of the trade relations. Last year, the volume of trade between China and Sweden reached $6.7 billion. That makes China Sweden's largest trading partner in Asia. More cooperation agreements are expected to be signed during this visit. King Carl Gustaf and Queen Sylvia met with Hu Jintao and his wife Liu Yongqing at the Royal Palace. The king and the president then inspected the Swedish Royal Guards. Lastly, Swedish ministers headed by Prime Minister Fredrik Reinfeldt came up to welcome the president. President Hu and his wife will stay 2 days in Sweden. In a written statement, Hu noted that in recent years, China and Sweden have built strong trade and business ties. During this visit, he and Swedish leaders will review past progress and explore new ways to strengthen mutually beneficial cooperation. Liu Yang, CCTV.
And earlier on, CCTV reporter Xiao Jian met with the Swedish ambassador to China, Michael Lindstrom, then talked about President Hu Jintao's visit to Sweden and Sino-Swedish relations.
Ms. Ambassador, thanks for your time for this interview. President Hu Jintao's visit to Sweden will be the first by a Chinese head of state since the two countries established diplomatic relations in 1950. What's the significance of this visit for Sino-Swedish relations?
As you're saying, first of all, the visit has a symbolic importance. I would say never in the history of China and Sweden, if you go back in time, never has an emperor of China, never has a president of China visited Sweden. So there is an enormous symbolic significance in this visit. But visits are more than symbols. They can also be very operationally important. The president is coming accompanied by 5 ministers and a delegation of about 100 people, and I hope that we will set process into motion that will help us in the years to come to continue discussions that were started when the president comes to Sweden. So I hope that this will also help to promote the working day-to-day relations between China and Sweden.
Last year saw the visit to China by King of Sweden, as well as retracing of a historical journey to China by Swedish ship Gothenburg. Was 2006 a milestone in Sino-Swedish relations?
Yes, we have a beautiful parallel. The Swedish, Their Majesties, the King and Queen of Sweden, came here invited to China by the President on a state visit, and now we have the state visit in the other direction. I think you can see almost like an image, the bridge between China and Sweden. The two halves are meeting. And in fact, the ship Gothenburg is also a symbol. It reminds us of the peaceful trade that we had 250 years ago.
In 2004, the first Confucius College in Europe was established at Stockholm University. Do you think Swedish people now understand China better than we understand Sweden? And how should we increase our mutual understanding?
Oh, that's a very good question. I can tell you that there is a record number of young Swedish people who want to study Chinese. So China is mentioned almost every day in our newspapers. There's a lot of curiosity about China and Sweden. But also coming here in China, I noticed that the Swedish model is often referred to in political debate and social debate, that Sweden has found methods of dealing with the rights and wrongs of society and justice in society, and how to include everyone in the welfare system and so on. So in China, I notice also a lot of curiosity about Sweden. It's a potentially wonderful situation right now.
In which areas do you think the two countries should collaborate more?
Well, I think all the way from politics to culture to technology. We have more than 100 agreements already between Swedish universities and Chinese universities. And clearly in the areas of science and innovation and industry, there are enormous possibilities for both our countries. But culture, we should not forget culture and people-to-people contacts. They're also very important.
Thanks, Ms. Ambassador. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Good luck.
President Hu Jintao met leaders of the 8 major industrialized countries on Friday on the sidelines of the G8 summit in Germany. Bilateral relations and joint efforts to meet global challenges were the main concerns of the Chinese president in those talks. Zhou Jun has the story.
President Hu Jintao told President George W. Bush that China and the U.S. should continue to cultivate strategic mutual trust, objectively view the development, and correctly understand the strategic intention of the other. President Hu Jintao urged the U.S. side to properly handle the Taiwan issue and jointly maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. He stressed that both should meticulously maintain the overall situation in Sino-U.S. trade, comprehensively and objectively view the problems during the rapid growth of their economic cooperation. Hu Jintao said the China-U.S. strategic dialogue, as well as the joint commissions of trade, economy, science, and technology, should play a bigger role. He added that economic and trade frictions should be dealt with by equal dialogue and consultation, and the politicization of trade issues should be avoided. Hu Jintao also suggested expanding cooperation and consultation in such areas as energy, environmental protection, and climate change. This could contribute to maintaining the world's energy security, combating global climate change, and improving habitat. He also called for deeper consultation and coordination in a joint effort to safeguard and promote peace, stability, and prosperity in the world. George W. Bush said China's rapidly expanding economy is noteworthy in the international community. He also thanked China for its role in dealing with the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula and its active efforts on Darfur in Iran's nuclear issue. In talks with French President Nicolas Sarkozy, Hu Jintao expressed satisfaction of the all-round and rapid development of the bilateral relationship. He noted the progress since the establishment of the comprehensive strategic partnership in political mutual trust, the strategic dialogue, economic and trade cooperation, and cultural exchanges. Hu Jintao said the two sides should continue to promote cooperation in energy, aviation, railways, and other key areas. He also called for expanding trade and investment. The French president said great potential exists for expanding economic and trade cooperation. Sarkozy also reaffirmed France's commitment to the One China policy. The two leaders also exchanged views on Iran's nuclear issue and the situation in Sudan's Darfur. Hu Jintao praised efforts by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and the Japanese government and public in developing relations with China. He said the Sino-Japanese ties face an important opportunity for further development. Hu Jintao said the development of the relationship bears on the fundamental interests of the two peoples and has an important influence on peace, stability, and prosperity in Asia and the world at large. Hu Jintao said China and Japan should lay a solid foundation for the further development of bilateral relations by strengthening mutual political trust and broadening mutually beneficial cooperation. President Hu Jintao stressed that the appropriate handling of history issue and the Taiwan issue is of great importance for the healthy, stable development of Sino-Japanese ties. Hu Jintao urged the two sides to abide by their commitments and implement their consensus in their policies and actions. Shinzo Abe noted this year marks the 35th anniversary of the normalization of diplomatic ties and is also an exchange year of cultural and sports events. He said that Japan is willing to seize this opportunity to boost its strategic, mutually beneficial relationship with China. Abe said his country will properly handle the history issue and the Taiwan question on the principles stated in the Japan-China Joint Declaration. In his meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, Hu Jintao said that China is ready to work with Canada to enhance their cooperation in political, economic, and cultural fields, as well as in international affairs. He noted that Sino-Canadian relations have developed smoothly since the establishment of diplomatic ties in 1970. He said the two sides should respect each other, treat each other equally, and properly handle their differences through dialogue and consultation. Harper said Canada and China enjoy long-term friendly relations, and there's great potential for cooperation in many important areas. He called for greater investment and trade cooperation, as well as cooperation in environmental protection and energy saving. President Hu Jintao discussed building stronger bilateral ties with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. In March, China and Russia agreed on guidelines and the directions for the development of their strategic partnership in the next decade. The two sides are discussing establishing a business chamber on machinery and electronics to boost trade. Hu Jintao said China will work with Russia in drawing up a comprehensive plan for investment cooperation. He said China encourages its companies to invest in Russian industries such as infrastructure, processing, manufacturing, high technology, timber, and energy. Hu Jintao added that China will work to promote cooperation with Russia in revitalizing the old industrial bases in northeastern China and developing Russia's Far Eastern and Siberian regions. Putin said that the Russian leadership values relations with China and stands ready to work with the Chinese side to boost bilateral ties. The Russian president hailed the ongoing Year of China in Russia, saying the event is proceeding smoothly and has been well received. The two leaders also praised the media exchanges, saying they serve to deepen the understanding between the two peoples. Hu Jintao's talks with Italian Prime Minister Romano Prodi focused on strengthening China's ties with both Italy and Europe. Hu Jintao said the political dialogue with Italy has been active and their coordination at the UN and other international organizations has been close. Hu Jintao noted that bilateral trade has been growing rapidly. He said the activities during the Year of Italy in China helped deepen the understanding between their two peoples. Hu Jintao also proposed encouraging investment and promoting cooperation in environmental protection and clean energy. Romano Prodi said a solid foundation has been established in bilateral ties and that Italy hopes to see steady growth in mutual investment and trade cooperation. The Italian Prime Minister said Italy and China share the same or similar views on many major international issues, and Italy is ready to enhance coordination with China on major international issues. Hu Jintao said developing ties with the European Union is an important part of China's foreign policy, and China hopes Italy will use its influence in the EU to boost those ties. Hu Jintao told German Chancellor Angela Merkel China will enhance exchange and dialogue with Germany in joint efforts to meet global challenges. Hu Jintao noted that China and Germany have been maintaining close coordination on important international affairs. He said it's encouraging to see the progress that has been achieved in bilateral cooperation, particularly in such fields as culture, education, science and technology, environmental protection, and justice. The Chinese president said that there's an urgent need for the international community to strengthen coordination in face of many challenges. And it has become all the more important for China and Germany to boost bilateral ties. Merkel said that the two countries now enjoy a close relationship. She hopes the two sides will work together to expand their cooperation in wider scope. The German Chancellor also hopes Germany and China will strengthen exchanges and cooperation in environmental protection and in tackling climate change. Zhou Jun, CCTV.
Saturday marks China's second Cultural Heritage Day. Premier Wen Jiabao and senior party official Li Changchun visited a special exhibition at the Millennium Monument Museum in Beijing featuring China's intangible cultural heritage. Premier Wen Jiabao first talked to folk artists specializing in traditional New Year woodcut prints and paper cuttings. He said intangible cultural heritage reflects the best of Chinese culture, symbolizing the wisdom of the Chinese nation, and it should be protected and enriched for its further development. Politburo Standing Committee member of the CPC Central Committee Li Changchun encouraged the artists to be more innovative in developing their arts. He said they should actively explore possibilities of tapping both the domestic and overseas markets for their works. China's effort to revive its rich cultural heritage is gathering momentum. A full range of exhibitions and performances marked Saturday's Cultural Heritage Day, with handicrafts and regional operas taking the center stage.
When this Tujiazhu woman from Sichuan province decided to study this traditional brocade, the only thing on her mind was to make a beautiful piece of dowry, exactly as her grandmother, mother, and aunts had done before her. But today, she's being honored with the title of folk artist, even though she seldom wears such ornate clothes now. Dozens of people like her have gathered for this comprehensive exhibition at the Millennium Monument Museum. When their skills were praised, many of them became as confused as they were flattered. Paper cutting, wood prints, marionettes, abundant histories and culture impregnated each piece of the exhibitors here. Modern ways of life are drawing out these handicrafts in an accelerating pace. And getting lost with them will be a wealth of human wisdom.
I often go to Shanxi province, where almost every woman is an expert at paper cutting. But in recent years, I see fewer and fewer windows decorated with these handmade paper images. For young people, paper cutting is out of fashion. They just don't bother to learn it.
Fortunately, a nationwide campaign has been launched years ago to rescue and preserve folk art. The efforts culminated with China's very first Cultural Heritage Day last year. It's become a day when most exhibitions can be attended for free. This year's event also coincided with an exquisite display of shadow puppets at the National Museum of Fine Arts, which opened on Children's Day last week. It offered kids the chance to enter an old-fashioned world of miracles and make-believe. Meanwhile, some husky, untrained voices are heard around Beijing's stages, where over 20 types of traditional operas are now playing. Nevertheless, there are those who think these special events are not enough to preserve the country's arts and culture. The fear is that one day people can only encounter these art forms in museums or theaters. That will be the day we bring an end to a link with the past. And it is this past that has made us what we are today. Luo Chen, CCTV.
You've been watching China Today on CCTV International. Coming up next after a short break. Guangdong authorities discover white ants in pistachio nuts imported from the United States. And Chinese businesses welcome Costa Rica's decision to cut diplomatic ties with Taiwan.
Hey, Jihai! Hi, Tom. Where are you going? I'm going to jet travel. Huh? Why? I'm going back to China.
Visa, air ticket, hotel. If you want to go to China, please contact Jet Travel. It's a one-stop travel shop.
Jet Travel, one-stop travel shop. Jet Travel, your gateway to the Far East.
Visa, air ticket, hotel.
Auriton Real Wood Floorboard. Real natural touch. Auriton.
CCTV9, China's only English-language news channel, broadcasts throughout China and across the globe. CTV Golden Bridge is CCTV International's exclusive advertising agent and can put your company in touch with an audience of millions.
Welcome back to China Today. We head south to Guangdong province, where 3 people have been killed by landslides. Continuous rainstorms have swept across the region since Wednesday. Downpours have also affected nearby Hunan province and the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. And Pan Deng has the story.
In Guangdong, cities and villages are suffering from the heavy rain. Floods have forced 300,000 people out of their homes. In Hunan province, when these drivers woke up in their trucks, they found themselves trapped by flood waters. The water level rose rapidly, forcing the drivers to take refuge on top of their trucks. It took local villagers and soldiers 8 hours to rescue them. More than 1 million people are estimated to have been affected by the extreme weather, and economic losses are severe. In Hunan province alone, rainstorms and floods have led to direct losses of over 600 million yuan or $75 million. In Guangdong, the figure is over 90 million yuan or $20 million. But the situation could still get worse. Weather forecasters say rainstorms will continue to lash the region over the next 2 days. Local authorities are coordinating resources to save lives, and so far no more casualties have been reported. Officials have built temporary shelters and are providing food and clean water for homeless people. Pan Deng, CCTV.
The National People's Congress of China and the U.S. Senate have wrapped up their 4th meeting under a parliamentary exchange mechanism. The 2 legislative bodies hope to cooperate more on energy and environmental protection. The 2 sides exchanged views on the Taiwan issue and the Darfur peace process. Arriving in Washington early this week, the NPC delegation held meetings with U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney and Senate President pro tempore Robert Byrd and other congressional leaders. Quarantine authorities in Guangdong have found white ants in a shipment of U.S. imported nuts. Experts say the insects pose a serious threat to China's trees and ecosystem. The ants were found in a 2-ton shipment of rotting pistachio nuts. The milky white ants are a dangerous species and are strictly prohibited under China's food import laws. Inspectors say the shipment of nuts are transported directly to China without transferring. The shipment passed U.S. quality tests and arrived with an official certificate. Guangdong authorities say they will destroy all the nuts and help the Chinese importer to seek compensation. Over in Costa Rica's capital, San Jose, the Chinese community is celebrating the country's decision to end its relationship with Taiwan. Analysts believe that as the mainland's market grows, allies of Taiwan are increasingly worried that they would be cut off from the important trade with the mainland. Costa Rica's President Oscar Arias said his country's decision reflects its desire to bolster economic ties with the mainland. Chinese businessmen in Costa Rica are welcoming the decision as a mutually beneficial move.
We have many more business opportunities for both imports and exports.
A photo exhibition on the Taiwan issue has just ended in the Spanish capital, Madrid. The event gave a detailed account of Taiwan's geography and history. It was designed to tell local Spanish people that the island is an inseparable part of China and every effort should be made to push for China's peaceful reunification. Zhu Hua has more.
The exhibition was called One China Peaceful Development. It displayed a large number of photographs illustrating how the Taiwan issue has developed and how the Chinese government has been trying to solve the issue. A Chinese official explained the purposes of the photo show.
First, through the photo show, the Spanish government and the people can understand that the majority of overseas Chinese strongly oppose Taiwan independence and firmly support China's reunification. Second, the exhibition explains the history, nature, and the current situation of the Taiwan issue, as well as the Chinese government's principles and the policies on the issue, to get understanding and support from the Spanish government and the people for China's reunification cause.
The exhibition received a lot of visitors, including Spanish officials, citizens, and representatives from non-governmental organizations, as well as overseas Chinese, including Taiwan compatriots living in Spain, and diplomats from other countries to Spain.
From the photos, we see the great efforts the Chinese government has made to try to achieve peaceful reunification. We hope this course is accomplished as soon as possible.
I'm glad to see that the Chinese government is trying to solve the Taiwan issue through dialogue, that peoples on either side of the Taiwan Straits are closely related culturally and economically and have the same roots, which is a solid foundation for dialogue. Mr. Deng Xiaoping put forward the policy of one China, two systems, successfully resolving the Hong Kong issue. I think the policy also applies to the Taiwan issue as the best solution.
Spain is the third country after France and Germany where the photo show has been held. The exhibition were all organized by councils of local overseas Chinese for the promotion of China's peaceful reunification. Zhu Hua, CCTV.
And finally, the Hong Kong Discipline Services are responsible for maintaining security and order in the Special Administrative Region. But now some staff are preparing to take center stage to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China. Officers from the correctional services are used to drilling and parading, but they find performing the Power dance a bit harder. Some had a hard time keeping tempo, but they are making significant progress. 8 departments of the discipline services will take to the center stage next week at the local cultural center. The event will showcase the service's hard work over the past decade and feature special equipment displays and rescue demonstrations. Well, that's the end of this edition of China Today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Zhou Yu in Beijing, and goodbye.
Welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, Helen Feng, and today we go to the Mongolian grasslands to explore one of the most significant instruments of that culture, the horsehead fiddle. This instrument is the primary string instrument of Mongolia, and its sorrowful sound is unmistakable. The legend of the horsehead fiddle and the music of this instrument will be our topic for today's Center Stage, along with a group of young performers who will reinterpret the sound of this cultural treasure.